the bookshop, it's the bookshop, it's the bookshop of Beverly Farms.
Howdy, everybody. This is Sam Feichel, your host of John Updike's Ghost, your favorite little podcast about reading, writing, being on islands off the coast of Connecticut, and all things awesome. I am joined, as always, by the co-host of this podcast, the co-owner of the bookshop of Beverly Farms, and my co-sibling, Hannah Harlow. How are you doing today, Hannah?
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm great. I'm on an island off the coast of Connecticut. I have nothing to complain about. It is beautiful here.
I also can't find anything to complain about. I'm also celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. We are not going to do any nonsense like our favorite Indigenous authors because giving Indigenous people one day is ridiculous, and I am not going to acknowledge that ridiculousness. And just because Christopher Columbus was a warmongering, genocidal jerkface does not mean we need to replace Columbus Day with like some token garbage. So, all of that said, why don't we get to our agenda today? First, we are going to talk a little bit about the wildly successful Boozy Book Fair.
The wild Boozy Book Fair.
It was wild. I was
wild.
Blew my hair right back. And then I have two books to talk about. One of them is The Timekeepers by Alyson Richman, which I didn't do enough research on, apparently, and read when I didn't really want to. And then I've got Holly Brickley's Deep Cuts, which I don't even know if it's a real book. I'll let you know more about it.
It is a real book. I also read that.
Oh, great. We can talk about it. Okay, super.
We can talk about it. It doesn't come out for a while, so I think I was probably saving it. I don't know. I read it actually a while ago now because...
Well, you gave it to me even more a while ago, and it just happened to be the last thing on my TBR file.
Oh, awesome. Oh. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that one.
All right, well, let's hear about your books.
My agenda. I have so many books. I have to look at my list here.
Oh, wow.
I actually read 2 books this weekend on this island.
Holy smokes.
Yep. Ditched my family for a while and read 2 books, but I'm not even talking about those books.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I'm talking about other books. I'm talking about Plot by Jean Hanff Korelitz.
Uh-huh.
And then 2 go together. I have The Road to Dalton and then Where the Forest Meets the River, and both of those are by Shannon Bowring, who we had in the shop last week.
Yes, Maine books.
Maine books. And then my last one is From Here to Eternity by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Kia.
Whoa, 2 people needed to write that book.
Well,
that's
Lisa
Marie
Presley died, so somebody had to finish it for her.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Wow. We all of our books are by women. No dudes allowed this week.
No dudes allowed today.
It's funny. So let's talk about the Boozy Book Fair, because I was at the Boozy Book Fair, which was held at True North Brewing in Ipswich. And first of all, thanks to everybody who came. It was really banging. Hannah brought an absurd amount of books. I was very terrified. I was like, this is a lot of books. It's not going to need this many books. But it did need all those books.
We did need all those books.
We sold a crap
we didn't
ton
sell
of books.
out.
No, we sold out of a lot of stuff, though.
We sell a lot of books, but
yeah, no, we still have a few books. If we had sold all the books, it would have been sad for the people who came at the end. They still had a chance to buy books, but we left with very few books. And I remember very distinctly talking to a dude. He was kind of older than me, so probably in his 50s, skinny, maybe Sarah's husband. The guy, he had like circle glasses and was wearing like a jackety kind of thing. No, he was the husband of somebody that is related.
He was the husband of somebody. I don't remember who. It wasn't Sarah.
Okay. Anyway, some dude who was the husband of somebody. He came up to me and told me he was reading that new Rachel Kushner book that
yes,
so much, right?
And he was loving it, and you were like, "Yeah, I didn't like that book."
Yeah, well, he comes up to me. He's like, "Oh, wow, Rachel Kushner, wicked good, right?" And I suspect he reads the New York Times. And I said, "I think that book is terrible." And he said, "You know what I think it is? I just don't ever really read books by women or with women protagonist. So I think I just really enjoyed the first person from the women's perspective. And I was like, wow, dude, I wouldn't have said that out loud
Yeah,
personally.
right, totally.
But
But then I feel like you recommended either Burn or Prophet Song to him.
no, I didn't.
Or was
I
that
don't think
somebody else?
I don't know. That was somebody else. I don't think I
Okay.
recommended anything to him because I was like so
Oh,
flabbergasted. I was like, well, I was like, wow, that's crazy because I feel like all the books I read are by women
yeah.
lately. Like
Yes.
I don't know how you can be a reader in like 2024 and not be reading women. Like the women are producing many, 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 many books. And if you're
Right.
just like, oh, hey, women also are writers now,
I
I
mean,
think maybe you need to walk yourself into modern times.
right, I've had men say that to me, not in a while. But I've also had men, and I actually really appreciate that. Like, because I do find myself, when I'm in the store and a guy's like, wants to read a novel, kind of leaning into some of the more male authors. And I've had guys be like, I'll read anything. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah. Oh, great. Then I'm
Mhm.
going to,
Uh-huh.
here's Chris and Hannah.
But I mean, so the reason I bring that up is not to rag on that guy, right? Like you're a generic guy. If you were in my front of me, real dude, I wouldn't be this mean to you, I promise. You know, I thought it was super interesting to meet people where they were as
Mhm,
in a way that you don't get to in the bookshop. Because when they come into the bookshop, they're either a reader for sure,
mhm,
they're on a mission to buy a present for somebody, right? Or whatever it happens to be. But there's a reason that they're there, and that starts the conversation. When you meet a lot of these people did not know the Boozy Book Fair was going to be going on, and so
mhm,
they was there to drink, and they wanted to talk about books because it was something to do. And my because I was trained by Beto at the hammock shop to ask informational questions as a sales technique.
right.
Every single person I asked, "Hey, what are you reading right now?" or "Read anything good lately?"
Yeah.
And stuff that came out of their mouth, I was just like so far from that same question in the bookshop, like
Right.
super random books or I don't really read or whatever. And but they wanted to talk about it. Like I felt like, people don't have a place to talk about books. And we offered them one and they were just like seizing on it. Like every single person just lit up at that question, which, should turn some people off from time to time. But everybody's like,
Right.
oh, yeah, I want to talk about that.
Oh, that's
Uh,
awesome.
I just thought it was just a great event because I felt like we were evangelists, like as though books were like, we were selling them drugs or something. It was, I don't know. Did you have this? I mean, you were running the cash register for so
Yeah,
much.
I mean, I was gonna say I didn't have as many conversations because at some point I was just checking people out. So it was just like a constant line of
Yeah,
people
it was.
for
It was
like
overwhelming.
a while. And
It
then
got
every once in a while I'd
uncomfortably
kind of like,
crowded.
yeah, um, yeah. And then at some point I'd like stick my head up and kind of, look around and be like, oh my God, what? And like at some point I switched with you and was just kind of restocking and whatever. But
I
yeah,
made
I don't
like,
know.
5 sales, I bet, because I'm so much slower.
Yeah,
But
I wonder like how often I was thinking, you can't do that every month. Like at some point it's like
oh
that's
yeah,
too
I mean, a lot of the crowd you brought. It was in Ipswich. You have lots
yeah.
of friends in Ipswich. It was well timed. Friday afternoon, people were looking for
I
something to.
thought Friday night was great.
A lot of kids were there. People were coming from sportsy stuff or going to sportsy stuff on the
Yeah.
way, and I thought it was great how multi-generational it was for being in a brewery. Like there was kids all over the place, and even some like teenagers and stuff that I talked to.
Yeah.
All those
I,
teachers that came, that was
the
great.
teachers that came were awesome. I thought that was really nice. But yeah, I think, we actually did a good job getting the word out
Yeah,
for once.
for
Yeah.
once. Yeah, we actually marketed appropriately for once. I don't know how often we could do it. It would definitely, you couldn't do it too often. But I want like what I really want to try to think of is what are those other like third spaces where it would work,
Yeah.
like people go to breweries, they don't have much to do, they're looking for something to do. Hey, we're right there, boom. But what else is like that? You know,
I don't know, because you're right. People did say to me at the end, I had some, friends, we were hanging out after we cleaned up, and they were like, it was just so nice because it's like, yeah, it gave us something to do while we're out here, drinking or whatever. Like I don't know, you get to our age and it's like, you can't just like sit around drinking for hours. Like,
no, I don't sit
you're
around
just not
drinking
built
at all
the same way.
anymore.
I mean, I don't either.
It's the two of us.
The two of us don't drink at all. So I don't go to breweries like ever anymore.
But that's the thing is like, what, and I've seen, there are like board game night places, that
I think that's why
maybe,
trivia nights have been so
yeah,
popular, that kind of thing.
right,
Right.
yeah. So I don't know. If people have ideas for where we could bring a bunch of books, I was thinking like it's very similar just a pop-up bookstore. You find just
Yes.
event
We basically,
spaces.
yeah.
But
Right.
then you have to bring everybody. What I really loved about it is there was a lot of people who were just like, "Oh, what's that over there? I'm going to go check it out."
Yeah. Totally. We brought a bunch of people in, but then there were also a bunch of people who were just there because they go to the brewery.
Yeah,
And there was a band there. There was a lot of other stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, it was mob scene. It was line out the door. It was great. And I thought it was really fun. Just there was a lot of pick me out a book challenges that I really enjoyed. Like, oh, you like this, then you like this, and we had a great selection. You did an awesome job as
Thank
always
you.
of making sure we had lots of different types of books so that like I could.
I think that was a
quickly
fun
condense.
challenge for me. People were like, what are you going to bring? And so I had to kind of, I picked a couple of categories. Like it was October. So we had like the scary, or like just like fall feels, right? Some of them were horror. Some of them were just kind of like the fall romance rom-coms or whatever. Witchy. There are a lot of witchy books. We did bestsellers. We did a little kids area, which I thought were just going to be for like guilty parents, but then there were all these kids around. So, we did
a
some
lot of
kids
erasers.
books.
That was great.
Yeah. We did the beer pairings. I thought those were fun.
I need to. There have been requests to cut and paste them onto the internet so other people.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to
see
do that.
all of them.
Yes. I think that I still have a link to that spreadsheet.
I can
beer
send you
pairings were good. Yeah, I'm not sure that they like sold any books necessarily, but
we paired. It was like, here are the beers. We pairing them with books that we think are good books. So like,
yeah, it's mostly just the way to show people those. We had the book talk books.
Oh yeah, I was thinking we were gonna have like a kind of a decent millennial crowd. I don't know if that's actually true, but then I was like, oh, let's bring all the book talk books. They're kind of like a younger crowd.
I thought there was a lot of millennials there for sure. I thought there were a ton of people in their like late 20s, early 30s. Although I don't know what millennials are 40 now or something. I don't know.
I mean, I'm the very end of Gen X and I'm mid 40s. So
right.
Millennials are 40.
Well,
anyway, why
don't we talk about this? Let's start with books that we don't want to spend a ton of time on, and then we can wrap up with deep cuts that we both read. So I read The Timekeepers by Alyson Richman. I was hoping it was like a time travel book. It's not. No, very much not. The reason it's called The Timekeepers is because the central family own a clock and watch repair store. And it's very heartwarming. I would say that people who enjoy those Nicholas Sparks novels would really like this one. It's so the family, they're just very kind-hearted and they tend to help people out. And their teenage daughter is embarrassed by how they always help out these poor people, including this veteran who has like half his face blown off, and this, child refugee of Vietnam. It's a Vietnam book in a lot of ways. Essentially, we go back in time to see how these Vietnamese refugees who they were on our side, I guess the good guy side in the Vietnam War, which, there's a lot of work to just kind of gloss over the fact that there was no reason for us to be in Vietnam in the first place. But we were the good guys, and some of the Vietnamese that wanted to help us are being ostracized by the bad guy communist Vietnamese. And so they flee Vietnam, and we see their journey to the US. And the mom of this, family who came from Ireland, so she knows about being a fish out of water, helps them. And yeah, it's one of those books where everybody has the same way of speaking. The dialogue is like Hallmark card, and
Okay.
it's very cliche filled. And I guess it's supposed to be heartwarming. I found it embarrassing. And this is one of the few books I felt bad about myself for reading it. I was like, this is not how I want to spend my time. So I
Have you
stopped.
finished it, or
No, no, no. I gotta have. Kristen heard me say it. I was just like, I'm not reading any more of this. I can't remember what happened, but it was so just, like it's just cartoonish. Sometimes can be okay, but I was shocked that this got published. To tell you the truth, it was
wow? Okay,
bad.
enough. I think we've covered that book. Then.
Sorry.
You're right. Moving on.
There you go. What about one of yours?
I don't know where to go from there, but let's go with The Plot by Jean Hanff Korelitz. I read this.
Sorry. Who is it by?
Jean Hanff Korelitz.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was talking over you.
I read this because I had many people recommend this to me. I think if you like Google or ask anyone, like, I read a lot of books about publishing. This is a book that comes up. It's like always on the list.
Oh yeah.
And
like Erasure. Love that book.
Which I actually haven't read yet. It's on my pile. But I don't know why I hadn't been avoiding it necessarily, but I'd actually guess I'd been looking for books that are actually set at a publishing house, right? A lot of these books about, quote unquote, about publishing are about writers, publishing a book. And I'm like, that's not the side
That's not about publishing.
Right,
we're not saying the guts. It's like saying it's about movies.
Yeah.
We're just talking about actors.
Yeah. So I'd been looking for more of those books at the time when this book was coming out. But I did finally read it because the sequel to this book, which is called The Sequel, just came out. So I was, I got the free audiobook on Libro, offered to booksellers. So
Gotcha.
I was like, let's give this a try. I found it very entertaining for the second half. I found the first half, like I knew what the book was about, just from reading the app copy and people telling me. So I found the first half like just pretty formulaic in a way. Like I'm like, okay, we have to get through this because I know you have to set it up. But like I know exactly what is going to happen. Like all this stuff has to happen for you to get to the second half. Where like I don't totally know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I found the first half like a little tedious, to be honest. It just felt like, okay.
Workman-like.
Yeah.
I think that can be, we've talked about it before, but some of that is when you have actual education in creative writing and fiction and stuff. Sometimes you can see the scaffolding like a little too clearly, but that might not necessarily be as transparent to, an untrained reader. Right.
So I think, yes, this was a problem a little unique to a handful of people.
Right.
But the setup is there's this dude who has written a couple of novels. The first one was pretty successful. Second one, not so much. Third one, he couldn't even sell. Yeah. And now he's, kind of this washed up creative writing teacher at a not very good low residency MFA program in Vermont.
Ouch.
And a
lot of people resemble that.
What'd you say?
I said a lot of people resemble that.
Yeah. Not unfamiliar. So he's having trouble, he's not writing anymore. He's all down on himself. He's a sad guy. And
lots of scenes with like uninterested students who say stupid things, and he gets frustrated and puts his hands through his hair.
And then he gets this student who is like kind of a douchebag and is like, but I have this amazing idea for a novel, and I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want anyone stealing it because it is such a sure thing, and it's a plot, right? And the guy and the writer guy is like, there are no new plots. Like there are a set number of plots, and we're all just rewriting the same plots in different ways. But this guy's like, no, I have a plot.
I've created an original story.
Yep. and then, 3 years go by, and he realizes the student, he's like, that book never came out. Somebody reminds him of the student, and he Googles the student, and he realizes that book never came out because the student died.
Oh.
And so then he's like, and so in his teacher's, one of his meetings, the kid had actually told him the plot.
Sounds like Yellowface.
There's some, there are a lot of similarities to other books. So the guy writes the book, and it becomes a bestseller, and blah, blah, blah.
And it turns out the student's not actually dead. He was just faking his death, and he comes back to say, you stole my story.
He is dead, but he does start getting messages from somebody who's like, I know you stole this story.
Right.
And so then we have to figure out who it is. Yeah.
Is it his girlfriend?
It's not his girlfriend. I will say, though, it was so obvious who it was. There were all these clues that the guy just kept ignoring. It would be like, he read this article and the article said blah, 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 blah. And the guy fixates on everything in the article except this one person that's mentioned. And then that keeps happening. It's then someone else mentions that same person. And the guy just
wistfully just lets that go. We know more
just doesn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
And so by the end, you're like, I think it's probably that person. Why wouldn't you be looking into this person? And then in the end, it's that person. And I'm like, were we supposed to be?
He's a washed up creative writing teacher at a low residency MFA in Vermont for a reason, not because he's super sharp.
Oh my God. So, I will say there were parts where I was like, yeah, it was entertaining. It was what people had said to me about the book was I didn't find it particularly well written, but I found that it had a good pace and it had a good plot.
Right.
Which I don't know that, I thought I didn't find it poorly written, which I felt like people had said to me. I thought it was very, it was, I felt like I didn't notice the writing. So to me,
wasn't clumsy or, you're not taken out of it all the time. Yeah.
Right. I don't know. So, it was a decent audiobook,
Oh, it was an audiobook too. Yeah.
I did the audiobook. I don't know that I need to read the sequel, but
yeah, the sequel is interesting that there is one. I have grown pretty tired of the books about books meta stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe that's my problem. Yeah. I'm I've read too many at this point.
Right. Well, actually, I sort of have that problem about the Holly Brickley book, but let's save that thought. I'm going to put a pin in that. Yes. Let's talk about Shannon Bowring's books. I like Maine writers, and I believe she is a librarian.
She is a librarian. So Shannon, it's pronounced Bowring. I asked her.
Oh, okay.
She came into the shop last week. She's lovely. And we talked about both her books. So the first book was called The Road to Dalton, and it's about a fictional small town in Maine, in Aroostook County. We're up in the county.
Up in the county.
Yeah. And it, very small town.
They don't. It's actually one of the.
That's all they have up there.
No, it's actually one of the misconceptions about Aroostook County. Aroostook County is not a rural county. It's a county of 5 cities, and then there's nothing in between. So it actually has some of the higher population cities in Maine. It's just that there's nothing in between. So there are some small towns up there, but everybody think actually Franklin County, where Farmington is the biggest town and only has 9,000 people in it, is small towns, whereas Aroostook County is micro towns and then cities. But that's a little sidebar. Anyway, she grew up in Aroostook County?
She grew up in Aroostook County. She based it off, the town she grew up in, though, all the characters are unique characters. She was everyone in her hometown, they were like, I know who you based this character on. And she's like, no, I really didn't.
Yeah, right. But they're the archetypes. There's a police chief and a fire guy and, dude who runs the dump and all that kind of stuff.
But you follow a bunch of different characters and you get their stories and everyone's interconnected. It's like, I asked her, like, did you have to draw the family tree on your wall? Like, reading it, you're sort of like, oh, it's this person's a cousin. Like, everyone just seems very interconnected.
Yeah, that's definitely true up there. Like, there's just only so many families.
Yeah.
Is it like Garrison Keillor, kind of shucksy? Is it, is it?
I mean, I actually,
romance?
She gets.
Do people get killed? What,
Yeah, people die. I'll say that. There is in the Road to Dalton, there's just kind of this big tragedy that kind of anchors the book, and it's leading up to the tragedy happens, and then it's the fallout of that tragedy.
Okay.
How it affects everybody.
Right.
And it's it's different generations. So there's like a young kid perspective, there's kind of these, newly married couple perspective, and then there's some like older people, you get their perspectives.
Yeah, I like that technique. I like that technique in TV shows. So it's like everybody has somebody they can identify with. It's like good family show.
Totally. And she gets compared to Elizabeth Strout and Richard Russo, because they are main writers, but it is actually very similar to the Elizabeth Strout books. And I think if you like those books, you would like this.
Yeah. Well, the cover that they gave it made it seem like kind of cutesy. So that's why I asked, is it literary?
It's very literary.
Okay. Yeah. See, I think the packaging doesn't send that message very well.
It's really good. So especially The Road to Dalton, I was like sort of blown away. And she did say, it was her MFA thesis that came out of that. And I could sort of see, I was like, did they all start as short stories? And she said, yeah. Like each chapter feels pretty self-contained, but she actually did a really good job of like making it feel like a novel at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But you finish a chapter and it has this like it's very writerly, which could be bad, but like I thought it was really beautiful. Like I think she just did a really good job of like wrapping up each chapter and, using some of the like tools at her disposal, the repetition, like whatever. Okay. Like it's really, really good. And then the second book, Where the Forest Meets the River, it's not quite, I didn't find quite as many pages where I felt like, oh my God, that was so good. Like that was just like so well written.
Is it a sequel? Is it it's just a book set in the same universe? Is it a totally different story?
It's a sequel. You're in Dalton 5 years later. So you have a lot of the same characters. You have a couple of new characters, and you're still kind of following them along. It's still like a still kind of the fallout of that tragedy, but you get a lot more resolution with certain characters, but it ends and there's a third one coming. Like it's just the way that ends. You're like, oh, we gotta come back.
I kind of like that. I like it when we like revisit this universe and the characters get shuffled up a little bit and the story doesn't necessarily continue, but like you don't have to like completely reorient yourself again,
Right. No, I was really impressed with both books, and I think I'm gonna have a good time recommending them to people.
Great. All right. We sure have some signed copies in the shop.
We do. Yes. We have a lot of extra signed copies in the shop that I will be hand selling to all of you through Christmas.
All right. Brilliant. All right. Let's talk about Holly Brickley and her deep cuts. So when do you think this comes out?
Like March or something.
Oh, March or something? So this is, I very rarely get these advanced reader copies that are in full galley form. This is like a printout with like a little plastic cover.
Right.
Yeah. This is so early that there are still like, you can see that there are comments in the Google Doc
I know.
that they just printed out. So, I'm not going to like get into, it could be totally different or whatever. So I'm not going to like get into like the super tight details of it. But what the reason I want to talk about it is one of two books that I read in the past 2 weeks, and I need something to talk about. And B, I mean, obviously you gave it to me because it's about this woman who is an aspiring music writer.
Right.
She went to Berkeley, met the first great love of her life, who
Not
is
Berkeley music. She went out to California.
that's a good, University of California, Berkeley. She's from Indiana. She takes her a while to find her friend group. She does find her friend group. This guy's a singer-songwriter type, ends up being in a band. She's kind of his muse slash co-writer. There's actually some stuff. I haven't finished it yet. I will finish this book. But I think there's some actual, like, really interesting, like, intellectual property shit that I hope it gets into at some point. Like,
Yeah, she does.
As a songwriter, so I'm glad it gets it, because as a songwriter, like, writing songs is really hard, and to write a good song is like super hard. And if you wrote part of that song, you deserve to get credit for it. And it's absolutely bullshit when like performers will take people's songs and make them their own, and the songwriter doesn't have any credit, and blah 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 blah.
She gets into that.
Good. So I'm looking forward to that. But there's also just tons and tons of musical references, because we get these little early starts at columns that she's going to write for this like feminist zine, and then that those are the ones that she deleted, and then we see the one that she submitted. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And Holly, it's got to be somewhat autobiographical, if I were to guess, because this feels like Holly's experience in college, and she's kind of riffing on it. I didn't look into her, but it feels like the path that I took to writing. I wrote for the newspaper and at Vermont, and I would be horrified by the music reviews if they were to make it to public consumption. You tend to be very first person. That was the first thing that Cliff Garvoden, my mentor, said to me when I got to the Phoenix is, you cannot use the first person for a year after working here. Nobody knows who you are or gives a fuck about who you are. So stop telling them I, because nobody knows who that is. You might as well say Johnny Smith from Idaho is writing this, because that is the same thing. So like, you see her making those mistakes. The musical references, like, I got them all, so I think there's a part of people who are reading this that are going to be like, oh, I'm also music smart because look at me, I get all these references or whatever,
So if I can interject here, I will say the music, I didn't get every single one, which was fine. I did feel like I wanted to read with Spotify on hand so I could kind of listen to songs as she wrote about particular songs. But the book also spoke to me really specifically because the timing of like the year she graduated from Berkeley, and then the year she moved to New York, those lined up almost perfectly with like the year I graduated from college and then the year I moved to New York. So she's talking about going to this like Interpol concert in New York. And I was like, I think I was at that show. Like this exact show she's talking about, like I think I was there. And so that made the book that much more fun for me. But that's like, only
it's very personal. That's what I'm saying. If you happen to be a 47-year-old woman who spent some time in Brooklyn, yes, I do think this speaks to you for sure. But I think it's somewhat, I think it's very Gen X, right? So it's, 9/11 in your early 20s, 9/11 in your late teens. You're old enough to understand it, but you're not really sort of wise enough to process it very well. It's going to kind of follow you around for a long time. It's really sad for me, right? Like, because this like music writer used to be a thing that you could aspire to be. It was a profession. It was like a thing you could do to make your living. It was competitive, but you could make money doing that. And now that's over, right? And so the book feels like really hollow for me, because all I can think about is, hey, like, you are aspiring to like dust, like even the whole like archetype of the, dude who works at a music store, like that was in High Fidelity, that, like that was like a full archetype in popular culture for like 40 years. Like, that person doesn't even make sense anymore. Like, what? There's a dude who sells records in physical format? Like, it's not even a thing.
That character's in the beginning of this book.
Right. And they're just, it's over, like, and so, for me, it just feels
it's a very nostalgic book.
Yes, exactly. It's nostalgic for a time that's gone. And,
Yeah.
it just made me sad because it doesn't have to be gone. Like, we just made all these societal choices to end this like really good thing where music was a part of our culture and it was important, and bands mattered, and it was a real art form, and there was critical dialogue about it, and artists
Right.
spoke to each other, and it's just all over.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a whole other part of this book, which is like the love story between the main character and this
Right.
dude musician, which did like, so, background, I received this bound manuscript, which is pre-galley, right? The editor reached out to me and she said, would you be able to read this early enough that we could get a quote and maybe put that quote on the galley?
Right.
So that's why it's kind of this early
Did you
stage.
give them a quote for the galley?
I gave them a quote, and I believe the beginning of my quote went something like, if you said you watched Nashville for the songwriting, but really it was because of the like Raina and whatever that guy's name was love story,
Yes.
then like Deep Cuts is gonna like satisfy an itch. Because I
Yeah.
did feel like you get some of this background, you get this like, becoming a reviewer, and you do get some songwriting and this like love of music, but at the heart of it is this kind of, unresolved love story, like
Yeah.
that goes back and forth. And are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it?
I don't
Whatever.
find myself caring about whether they make it or not. Like I think that's, if the book fails, which I'm not necessarily saying it does, it's because I'm not sure. Or maybe that's a good thing. Like, maybe we shouldn't be sure whether we want them to get together or what we want to have happen.
Oh, I
Right?
think
Like, I think
that
it's fine. That's good, I
book
guess.
very much is a case of like, I don't know if they should get
Right.
together.
Yeah.
Like,
So
I'm
I
not
guess
sure this
that's
is a healthy relationship.
right. And I guess that's good. Like, so,
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
And I
Um,
think there is a lot of sadness there too in that relationship of like they're kind of wasting a lot of time and effort on each other if this is not going to work out. Like, you
right.
guys should go find
Yeah.
something better.
And it's in the first person from the female sort of narrator protagonist. I think part of it is she is so there's like this like kind of self-loathing sort of
Yeah.
not lack of confidence built into her character, and
She can be pretty caustic, maybe is it? I don't
yeah, I
know if
think
that's
that's
the right
supposed to be it,
word,
right?
but
Like, you're an ironic reviewer. I actually don't think I don't think she does a good enough job of sort of establishing why like people don't like her. Like, I think she seems likable, but maybe she's like,
right.
you know.
But she is sort of
Um,
telling you in the beginning, like, people don't like me because I
right, yeah,
say the wrong thing. I say, mean things or
right.
whatever.
There's a little bit too much telling and not enough showing, maybe, with that. I don't
Mm.
know. And there was someplace I was going with that, and I just got lost.
Sorry,
But it's
I
okay.
interrupted.
You know. Uh, the like, I do think she does a pretty good job. I've been noticing it happening more and more often where women are putting these sort of instances of like sexual assault and like
Mm.
inappropriate sexual contact into plots
Hmm.
without it being like this central plot feature necessarily,
Hmm.
like, which I think is good. So
I think it's good
often
too,
when you see
because
sexual assault, it's like,
yeah,
oh, this is a big deal. And
and
it
it
is a big
ruins their whole life. It is a big deal,
it is a
first of
big
all,
deal, but it
but
ruins their whole life, right? And they're not
right,
able to like function because this terrible thing has happened to them.
right,
And this is more like, it's just sort of establishing that these terrible things are part of being a woman growing up in Generation X, and you were just going to
yeah.
have these sexual assaults as part of your life. And I
And a lot
think
of
that
people
does
are able to like, you know,
get on with
deal with
things,
it
but
and move on, and
right, not that it's a moral failing if like you are
right,
perseverating on it or whatever, but like, if every woman was destroyed by having one of these things happen to her, there wouldn't be
yeah,
any women left,
there would
and
not be,
I
right,
think that's what it does a great job of establishing is like part of being a woman and growing up is figuring out how to get on with your life when these men have done such terrible things to you. And for that to just be like a subplot that kind of burns through the bottom of this, I think is pretty hard to execute. I think she did a good job of that.
yeah.
And I think it's kind of important that, and I think there are other, kind of similar, like you're starting to see it in like books by authors of color where they like just have these sort of racist things that happen to them and it doesn't derail them. It doesn't end their life. That's just like, this is part of being a person in 20th century America.
No, Andy, I think we are seeing it more. I can't think of other examples, but I know I've seen it in other places. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an evolution of, how we're talking about sexual assault.
Right. I think it's important because I don't know. It's sort of posited sometimes as like a thing that happens to broken people, and it needs to be a thing that happens to everyone,
Right. Unfortunately, yeah.
Right, because I think the flip side of it is, oh, you're a high functioning person, you must never have had something like this happen to you. And that's ridiculous. That's very bad,
Yeah. So Deep Cuts comes out February 25th. Of 2025, so not that far away. And I do think people will be hearing about it. I think the publishers, pushing it pretty hard. I think they think it has a chance of being a real success. Whether that's true or not, we'll see. But
I think just like, having it, there is a select few people that are going to think it's cool that a character's like, oh, the new Spoon single was on, and I will know exactly what song she's talking about because I know that it's 2001 and I know what record came out, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Or like, there is these like, I just read this part where she was talking about being in New York the summer that Hey Ya came out, right? And like, how that was everywhere. It was everywhere. Just like, you could not escape that song, and it was great, and parties were great because of that song, and everybody who
all the weddings I went to that summer,
right
in New York,
right,
I was there in New York.
Like
that
all
summer.
the single ladies, right? Like all the single ladies, I think came out in 2003 or something, and she's talking about it, and it's like, that song is 21 years old,
No, it's wild. But I think there are a lot of women in their late 40s who read books, so like this could work.
I also think it's got good cross gender appeal because there are so many dudes who their whole life is like, oh, I know all these songs from 2003. All right.
Myself. Anyway, we said we were gonna. I do have one more book.
What do you got?
I have From Here to Eternity by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Keough, which is a memoir that Lisa Marie Presley was, trying to write. And
you read this book?
I listened to it.
Okay.
So my husband was like, why are you listening to this book? Like, why would you choose this book?
I'm also curious to the answer to that question.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, I'm not like a particularly big Elvis fan or Lisa Marie
I've
Presley
never known
fan.
you to listen to Elvis ever.
Right. But my sales rep kept emailing, being like, okay, this is going to, you want to keep an eye on stock. This is going to be a book club pick and a big one. And then Oprah chose it for her this month's book club. Yeah.
It's just because old ladies love Elvis. That's all it is. Like,
I guess.
Kristen's mom watched the Elvis movie like 9 times.
Wow. I watched half of it and then was like, this is so long and kind of boring now. Like, what? So I didn't finish it. But then the sales rep in her most recent missive about like the Oprah pick, keep an eye on stock. She was like, I listened to the audiobook and it was phenomenal. And booksellers can get free access to the entire Penguin Random House audiobook library. So I was like, well, let's go see how the audiobook is. I had just finished Plot. So it was like perfect timing. I got this email. I need a new audiobook. So I went and I downloaded it, and it's Julia Roberts reading Lisa Marie Presley's parts. So then I was like, oh, it's Julia Roberts.
Right.
So I started listening. And it was also only like a 5-hour audiobook. So I was like, I can just knock this out.
I suspected this was not a very long book. Yeah.
So Julia Roberts reads the Lisa Marie Presley parts. Lisa Marie Presley she didn't finish the memoir when she died, but she left behind all these kind of audio recordings, like her notes for the book. And so her daughter, Riley Keough, kind of took those notes and she finished the book, but like in her voice. So then Riley reads her sections. So the memoir
Okay.
starts out very like Lisa Marie Presley heavy. Like the first third of the book is like her memories of Graceland, which are just bonkers.
Right.
You
I'm
know,
sure.
just she's
I actually
she's
want to
just
read that. Yeah.
yeah. No, I think you'd really like it.
Yeah. I love Elvis. I'm a big Elvis fan.
She is a total daddy's girl. Clearly was infatuated with her father.
Right.
And what I got out of listening to this part was like, oh my God, her poor mother. Like there's almost no mention of her mother.
Yeah.
Clearly, like, really didn't like her mother at this point in her life. But
Not
you
all
get a
that weird for a
ton of
teenage girl.
you get a ton of Elvis stuff. Well, her dad died when she was 9.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, so
Yeah.
she was there when her dad died. Like she was in the house
Right.
and she sees him getting kind of wheeled out.
Yeah, I guess I abstractly knew that, but yeah, 9-year-old seeing her father, die of a
Yeah,
drug
and then
overdose in the
basically
bathroom is probably bad.
she never really gets over it. Like
Right.
she's so then
But she was in the public eye her whole life for reasons that are kind of not clear to her. Like you can't really
that's
comprehend how popular your father was when you were 9.
right. And that's what comes through in the book is, just how huge Elvis was for now society to just care so much about his daughter who, has done nothing but be born to Elvis.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you're like you're a royal family member,
Right.
just
She
your
is like a royal
existence.
family member.
Yeah.
She cannot go anywhere without photographers being around and people caring like what she looks like and what she's doing.
Yeah, which is
And
crazy.
so then it was just crazy. And and her teenage years, she hates her mom. She's doing a crap load of drugs, seemingly starting at like age 11.
Yeah.
So basically all her whole teenage years were just partying and chaos. And then you get her marriages, did a bunch. The most interesting is like what she has to say about being married to Michael Jackson, where you're like, oh my
Oh, I
God, she was
forgot
married
about
to
that.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah. That was so
Oh,
weird.
so weird. She was like really in love with him. She got really infatuated with him. And he wanted her to have his babies. And she was like, you know what? She was very intuitive. She was very like, she led with her heart and she was like all emotion, right? And she was just
Right.
like, this doesn't feel right. Like she really wanted, she had 2 babies with her first husband,
Uh-huh.
Danny Keough.
Right.
She like starts talking to Michael Jackson while she's still married. And so she gets divorced and she marries Michael Jackson and he's like, I want you to have my babies. And she's like, this doesn't feel right. And so she like won't do it. He has his own anesthesiologist.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that seems problematic.
Yeah.
So that marriage didn't last very long, but it
No.
was
I remember it in the
super
pop
interesting.
culture. So strange.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, I actually saw like some weird video with the granddaughter of Elvis. And I was like, why is the granddaughter of Elvis being interviewed? And so this is why.
This is why. So then as you get to the mid to the end of the book, you get a lot more of Riley just telling the story and what she
Right.
remembers and filling in all the gaps from like whatever notes her mom left behind. And then the last third of the book is just about, so Lisa Marie Presley then got married, in her 40s again to somebody, I forget who he is. And then she has twins.
Ah.
So she has these 2 babies. And after her C-section, they give her, like painkillers, and then she gets addicted. And then it's just like this downward spiral into addiction. It's really sad and terrible.
Jesus. Great.
Yeah.
Can't
Anyway.
love the pharmaceutical industry more.
But I just love, like, throughout the book, it was like, all my mom wanted was like a normal life. And for a while we had this normal life. And I was like, this is not a normal life.
Not normal.
I was like, there's nothing normal happening here.
Semi-normal.
But like the parts where they were like, this is normal, is because it was like, they were
They
for a
lived
while like a
together in
happy
the same
family
house and
in the
had
same
dinner
house.
together. Yeah.
Right. But I was like, but you also have like 30 staff members living in this compound with you. And like, you seem to be going to like Hawaii and all these other like
Yeah. You have
places
billions
all
of
the time.
dollars.
Yeah. I was like, this is not normal.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously read so many of these musician biographies, and we think like, okay, Taylor Swift is famous or whatever, like we have this impression of fame. But the way that Elvis was famous, the way the Beatles were famous, the way that Frank Sinatra was famous, like it was next level,
It was.
And Elvis especially, Kristen's mom tells stories all the time about like her parents forbade her from listening to Elvis. And
Right.
so she and a friend like got in a car and drove 500 miles to some concert in Georgia and, like all kinds of crazy stuff because he was everything. They just couldn't get enough of him,
Yeah.
and that persists. They just, have that kind of longstanding traction.
It's what you get, it was super interesting to read about just how bonkers it was.
Yeah, I might read that because I think the whole Elvis story is just amazing because he was, I mean, just the way that he was managed and all that was just crazy. All right, well, we won't go into the history of Elvis. That seems a little bit much. Do we have anything to pimp here at the end of our show when people have
I'll just say, we have a couple more events coming up at the end of October in the shop. Seth Rogoff and Joanne Hart are going to be in the store on October 23rd. They both have novels from small presses. I think they'll be super interesting to hear from.
Cool.
And then the last week of October, we have Diane Brayley returning to the shop. She did an event with us for her, her first book.
Diane C. Brayley.
Yeah, so she'll be back. And then in November, we take a break from author events and we kind of just roll into the holidays. So
there's going to be slanging books is what we're going to be doing.
I will say there's a lot of inventory right now, so come start your holiday shopping early.
I'm sure we'll have some holiday themed events as we get closer to that holiday season. It's not as though we're going to be doing lots of like
holiday fairs around different towns, so you'll be hearing from us.
You will be hearing from us. That's a promise. All right. Well, without further ado, then we will say our goodbyes and we say see you next time.
See you next time.